afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today's session. So, for today's session, the guest speaker is Dr. Ishita Gupta. A very warm welcome to you, Doctor.
Thank you, Kanika. Thank you so much.
So, to introduce Dr. Ishita is a medical graduate from India, currently living in Dubai. Doctor has also published 35 publications and she's also a reviewer in many of the organizations. Along with that, Doctor has written exams for UK, US, Canada, and Dubai. I hope you people remember that Dr. Ishita has already done a session on step 1 comparison of all the countries' exam. So today, Doctor will be speaking about the comparison between all the step 2 sessions. So, Doctor, once again, a very warm welcome to you. And Doctor, you can share your screen.
Thank you, Kanika. Hello, everyone. All right, I can share my screen now. 1 second. Okay, you can let me know if my presentation is visible and everything. Kanika?
Yes, Doctor, your screen is visible.
Okay, all right, great. So, hi everyone, my name is Ishita, like Kanika said, and today we'll talk about step 2. We've already done one on step 1. So I wanted to follow a very similar outline for the step 2 as well, so it's all consolidated into one place. So let's start with that. All right, so let's start with the general comparison that has facts, not sort of personal experience, just facts about all of the exams. And I wanted to sort of make this table so it's easy. You know, there are lots of things that you need to search on different websites and all of that. So I've sort of tried to put it into a table, and I hope that helps. So, for example, let's start with what does step 2 mean? So as you remember, we talked about step 1. It's very similar. Some of the exams have 3 parts, some of them have just 2. So step 2 for the USMLE is just one part of a 3-part exam. So the USMLE has step 1, step 2, now step 3. They've got rid of one of the steps. So step 2 is now a written exam that's part of a 3-part exam. That's basically it. But in PLAB, it's step 2 or part 2 is the last exam that there is in the series. So PLAB has PLAB 1, PLAB 2. PLAB 1 is written, PLAB 2 is a practical exam. So and step 2 or part 2 in PLAB is the last exam there. For QE1 has now again QE1 has 2 parts. Before again it had multiple, but they've got rid of it now. So part 1 was the written. In this, it's part 2 or the step 2, whatever you want to call it, has a separate name. Again, that's a practical exam, and it's called the NAC-OSCE exam. Again, it's part 2 of the 2-part exam that's there for Canada. For MRCP, that's just like the USMLE. Now, MRCP has 3 exams, the 3rd one being practical that we'll not talk about now. So for MRCP, the 2nd part is actually a written exam, but that does not complete the series. There's one more exam. So that's what part 2 or step 2 means for different exams. Now, going over the format very quickly, but again, before that, the MCCQE, there's no more MCCQE part 2 anymore. They got rid of it. There's information on the Canadian website. I've also linked the website towards the end of my presentation, so if anyone's interested, you can go and read about it. I can put it in the chat if needed. So what they now have is the practical exam, the NAC-OSCE. So I'm very sure of the exact format or a lot of facts about it, but whatever I could get on their website is what I've mentioned over here, just to clarify. Now, so how's the format for this? The USMLE Part 2 or USMLE Step 2 is a 1-day exam. Part 1 was 8 hours. This is 9 hours. So they just have one block extra, one block of questions extra. That's the difference between part 1 and part 2. PLAB is also, it occurs over a day. It would take about 2.5 to 3 hours, but since it's a practical exam, and it's in person, so it does depend on certain things at times, the time allotted for each station or scenario that we'd go through what those are later, but the time allotted for those are fixed. But at times there might be a bit delay because there is human involvement and all of that. So about 2.5 to 3 hours, I'd say. For the MRCP, that's a 1-day exam again. It's not overnight. And it has 2 parts. It's very similar to the MRCP part 1. There are 2 parts. Each part is 3 hours. So you sit down, you write a test for 3 hours, then there's a break time, and then you write another test for 3 hours. So that's how it is. Basically 6 hours plus an hour of break. That's what MRCP part 2 is. About the fee, now these are the most recent ones. So if they were changed from, I think the PLAB had a change in April or something, but these are the most recent fees that I found on the website. Again, my bibliography is linked towards the end. I will put it in the chat. For the USMLE Part 2, the fees is about $1,000, but that does not include the international delivery charges. So it's $1,000 base fee, plus there would be some surcharge if it's taken outside the United States or Canada. It can be taken outside the United States and Canada, but you'd have to pay a certain fee. And it's different, that fee is different for each region. It is linked over here in my presentation, but again, towards the end, I'll put all of this in the chat. For the PLAB Part 2, it's a bit similar to the USMLE, but slightly more than Part 1. It's a 934 British pounds. Again, this is the most recent. I think they had a change just a month or so back. For the QE one, now this fee is for the NAC-OSCE. Remember, the part 2 is the NAC-OSCE, the practical exam, and that is 3,000 Canadian dollars. The USMLE fee is in US dollars, obviously. This is Canadian dollars. MRCP, again, if there's an international surcharge. So if it's taken in the United Kingdom, it will be full £60, but internationally it's about 616 British pounds. Again, just to clarify, these are the most recent ones that would be applicable from whatever the next application season is, or whenever you try to apply now onwards, sort of the thing. Okay, now what's covered, or why are we taking this, and what sort of is being tested? So USMLE Part 2, if you remember, Part 1 was basic science, USMLE Part 2 is clinical. So it does not include all of the basic sciences. There are no such questions. It's all clinical. Obviously, there might be, I remember that there were a few, here and there, again, trying to link everything to clinical science, but this is a very patient scenario overview. So they would sort of give you lots of things about a patient and ask you a particular question. They start off with comorbidities and the vitals and lab imaging, etc., and probably have a question at the end. So sort of it's like you're taking a clinical exam, right? It's a whole scenario and then a question. There are no one-liners. There might be, but very, very few. So these are whole paragraph type questions. For the PLAB, what's covered now? The PLAB Part 2 is a practical exam. So this includes clinical scenarios. It includes role plays. So you obviously would play the role of the doctor, and there would be an actor who would play the role of a patient. I can go into the detail. I have a detailed slide later about that. I haven't taken the NAC-OSCE, so I've left that blank, just to clarify. For the MRCP Part 2, that's totally internal medicine and its divisions, like we talk about in Part 1. The only difference between MRCP Part 1 and Part 2 is that Part 2 also includes images. So what happens is in part 1 they don't give you anything image based, so none of the questions have an image. And by an image I mean, for example, any kind of 3D imaging, CT, MRI, ultrasound, X-ray, etc., or any kind of a skin lesion picture, for example, or an ECG, or some kind of a cardiology imaging, etc. There are lots of imaging in medicine, right? So in part 2, what they do is they give every test taker a separate booklet. So you would have the question booklet, the answer sheet, and where you mark the answers. And there would also be a separate booklet which has lots of images, and you need to correlate with the question. They would mention it very well. This is for question number 2. The question number 2 also has it. There's an image which is on page number this, and so on and so forth. That's how they do it with the images. So that's the major difference. But MRCP part 2 also is much more decision making compared to part 1. That was more, again, factual and etc. Right. Now, where can all these exams be taken? Where's the center? Is it around the world? Is it only in that certain city, etc.? So that's what I want you to know. So USMLEs can be taken anywhere. They do apply. They do take in a surcharge, so it can be taken in something called as the Prometric. Prometric is the testing agencies. They're the third parties that have testing centers around the world. So if you go onto their website, you can just put in your exam and find out where it can be taken and a lot of details about it. PLAB Part 2, that's a practical exam again. That's only taken in the GMC office in Manchester. That's the General Medical Council office in Manchester, United Kingdom. So it only occurs over there. So you have to fly and take the exam over there. I need to reiterate here. So you'd also have to, if you need one, you also have to apply for a visa. A lot of the times you have one, you don't need one, etc. That's different ball game. But if you do need a visa, to fly to Great Britain, you should be considering that, before taking up your the date for the exam, and considering preparation time. You should also consider the visa wait time and all of that. So that's why I wanted to put that in. The NAC-OSCE, that's the Canadian exam. That can only, again, it's a practical exam. It's only taken in Canada. Now that, I think, has multiple centers. It's not only one center like the PLAB. It's not only Manchester. The NAC-OSCE, the MCCQE Part 2, the practical exam, has different centers. I remember seeing that Toronto itself had one or two maybe, and then there were other provinces, as they call it. Again, I've linked that website towards the end where you can read about it. For MRCP Part 2, that's written. That can be taken anywhere around the world. And the testing agency, they don't have a third party. It's conducted by the British Council. So that's just direct, but again, it can be taken anywhere around the world. So how many times is it conducted? All these exams, I reckon, are conducted multiple times. It's not just one exam per year. The USMLE is multiple. So, you just go to Prometric, check the country check the city or your center that's closest to you, or where you'd like to sit the exam. And they would also show you some dates that are available. So they do have multiple dates in a month. For PLAB Part 2, again, that's multiple. If you remember, PLAB Part 1 just had 4 dates, but PLAB Part 2 is not like that. There are multiple dates. So again, you can just, once you're eligible to apply for the exam, it opens up. Once you've passed PLAB Part 1 on the GMC website, it does open up the portal to apply for PLAB Part 2, and you can see lots of dates and choose accordingly. The center would just be one, that's Manchester. I'm not sure of the NAC, like I said, I haven't taken that. For the MRCP Part 2, That's conducted just like the MRCP Part 1. So it has 4 dates around the year. So they're called diets. So there's diet 1, 2, 3, and 4. There's one in February, which I said. There's one in May, which I think just happened this week or probably last weekend. There's one in September, that will be the beginning of September. And then there's one in December. That's again, I think mid-December or so. So these are 4 dates and around times. Obviously, dates could change, but there are just 4 dates for the MRCP. So again, if you're someone who's who wants to sit the test in a place that's usually very crowded, you can probably check, the season opens. So the time to apply for diet number 3, that's the September exam, would open at a certain time. So I think for September it opens in July. So as soon as it opens, you could probably check, if you're eligible and how many, is it too crowded, or if you're very certain that you want to sit that exam, I probably reckon booking the exam as soon as possible because of the limited number of dates. Okay, so now when were the results released? This is sort of to give you a timeline, and this is for me. This is not official data. The official data is very different from what happens practically. This disclaimer, the last row is how it happened for me. So when were the results released? For USMLE, it came in about 3.5 weeks. I'll say not exactly 3.5. For PLAB, it was 3 weeks. Very exact. I haven't taken them that. For MRCP, again, it was actually 2.5. It was very quick for MRCP Part 2. About 2 weeks and 5 or 6 days. Super quick. Okay, moving on. All right, so now I have detailed slides on each exam. So we'll just talk about that exam. I just wanted to give an overview before. And also on each of the slides, I've put in tiny logos, as you can see, just to make sure that people are referring to the right site or using the right sort of sources to study. Why? Because there might be some duplication, with everything being virtual, so we don't want that. All right, USMLE Step 2, this is the logo of United States Medical Licensing Exam, the organization. So make sure that you're referring to something that looks like this. Like we said, this is a part 2 of a 3-part exam. Now, this exam, unfortunately, does not guarantee a license to practice medicine in the United States. So you sat step 1, you sat step 2. You might think that, you should be able to get a license to practice, but it does not. So what does it do? After taking, if you are an international medical graduate, that is an IMG, that is someone who's, in terms of USMLE, someone who's graduated medical school outside the United States, you are an international medical graduate, even if you are a citizen of the country. So for international medical graduates, there's something additional that's called ECFMG certification. So ECFMG is Education Commission for Foreign Medical Graduates. They do a lot of work. And what they do is they certify international graduates, saying that a very rough definition, or very paraphrasing this, but in simple terms, it's just telling people in the United States that this person who did not go to med school in the US, but now has the knowledge and capability of an MD graduate, of a recent MD graduate, or final year medical student in the US. So they are at par. Now they've tested that, so they've certified. So you need to take both parts 1 and 2 of the USMLE to be ECFMG certified. And they also have additional requirements. There's an English test that's needed. They might need,